They say prison will change a person, but I firmly believe it changes a family forever. I received a DM from somebody who I least expected to hear from, and it brought all kinds of memories back. And today I want to unpack it with you. My name is Ashley Marina. I am the host of the Ash to Dusk podcast, where we talk about everything and everything dealing with life, motherhood, entrepreneurship, leadership, just personal growth in general. We get this one life to live, and we're all wanting to step towards our purpose and live our best life. And in order to do that, we also have to navigate the messy middle of things. And that's what we do here on Ash to Dusk. All right, so I received a DM, a message on Facebook from somebody who I have not spoken to or heard from in a really, really long time. And she was incarcerated with my previous mother-in-law. And I want to talk about this. It has been something that has been a part of my healing journey, my personal growth journey. And I also don't share a lot about this because although I'm healing and I'm growing as a person, I recognize that it's also not my place to share everybody else's hardships and the things that they are still healing and growing from, or maybe choosing not to. But it's really a fine line of sharing my truth and my experiences in hopes to help you, but at the same time, at what extent to not hurt somebody else. And so I struggle with this. But when I got this message, I'm like, I think somebody watching is experiencing this or has experienced it, or honestly, you might just learn something from this conversation. So I'm probably going to fumble through it, but I'm going to do my best to honor everybody who's been involved and really try to stick with my experience and how it might help you. So, all right. Many of you know that I am remarried, and my previous husband, he and I were, high school sweethearts. I knew him since I was 14 years old. We got married when I was 19, and we ended up divorcing when I was 26. But during high school years, we learned that his mom was embezzling a lot of money from the business that she was working for, and ended up getting a 6-year prison sentence. Now, this was something that I had zero experience in, and nor did my ex-husband. Like, we knew no one who was ever incarcerated. And, you think about what prisoners go through, but oftentimes many people don't talk about what it's like to have a loved one in prison and the toll it takes on you, and the manipulation that can happen either from the person who's incarcerated or the prison system in general. And yeah, and honestly, I wouldn't wish it on anybody. Now, I got this message from someone who was in prison with my ex-mother-in-law. And, you know, without going into all of, a ton of specific details, I can tell you this. My former mother-in-law and I were really, really close. And a relationship that I didn't even have with my own mom at the time. And, I enjoyed being around her, and there were some good memories early on. And then right before she went to prison, we learned that she was also having an affair with my stepdad at the time. And again, I don't want to go so far into this, but I want to share this with you because that instantly broke trust. So we learned about the affair, that broke a ton of trust. And then coupled with around the same time getting arrested and then going through the, court system and all the things, and then being incarcerated for 6 years. So my ex-husband and I struggled when she was away because he still had a younger sister who was in school, and he and I were moving in together at that point because, he didn't really have anywhere to go, and I was 15. So when I tell you that I've shared in previous episodes that my ex-husband and I moved in together when I was 15, that was the reason why. And we both had to grow up really fast. I feel like I've had to grow up pretty fast just in my own personal childhood, but my ex had to as well. And when you have somebody in prison who you love, you don't want to always believe the bad, but then when you keep hearing all the things, you're just like, what is like you it's almost like you loved somebody who doesn't really exist. You just loved somebody who was putting on a facade. And it was painful. It was so painful for both of us, because, she still had a lot of expectations of us when she was incarcerated, wanting him to take in things that were illegal to take in, giving money when we were completely broke, just trying to pay our own bills and barely surviving ourselves. And so this person, when she wrote in to me, had just said, I listened to your podcast and oh my gosh, your story about your divorce and childhood and things were nothing like I was told. And of course, their relationship went south years ago, but they were really close when they were in prison and got through their time together. So when I got that message, I had a lot of things that I've been thinking about over the last few weeks since I got that. And it's been, you know, you put away trauma in a compartment and you try not to think about it, right? Like you go through therapy and all those things, but you kind of leave a part of that behind. And then, things will come up like a note like that, and then you think about those things. You think about how far you've come and you've healed from that moment. But knowing somebody in prison is, you feel like you're in prison yourself. And I don't think that I ever realized that until later on in life, that while she was incarcerated for 6 years, we were too. We just weren't behind the bars, we were on the other side. We got married with her behind bars. We had two of our children with her behind bars. She was able to come home a little bit early if she was released to somebody who could do house arrest, and she lived with us while was on maternity leave and just had my middle son. And boundaries were something that we struggled with because it was his mom. It was my ex-husband's mom. It was somebody I used to be close with and then I no longer trusted anymore after I learned so many things about her. And what happens is when a relationship goes bad, I don't care what kind of relationship it is, a business one or, personal. When a relationship goes bad, there's always two sides and a truth that lies somewhere in between. There's two different perspectives, and there's really the truth. And I have realized going through someone, who was incarcerated, going through divorce, going through a business partnership that went bad, I've learned over time that it's always best to just stay quiet and not feel like you have to explain yourself to people and to let others believe what it is that they believe. And here's why. Because when you try to prove yourself or give your side of the details, the thing is those people have already made up their minds about you, right? So same thing with this person who was incarcerated with my former mother-in-law. She had already had her own formed opinions about who I was and what I might have done to my ex-husband, but never having a different perspective. But she wasn't really willing to have a different perspective, more than likely, until her relationship with my former mother-in-law went south. Does that make sense? Because then it's like once you've been hurt by that person, then you're like, well, wait a second. Maybe there's more to the story here. There's some other things going on. And so I want to really convey that with you right now. You may feel like you're being misunderstood by somebody in your life or at work. And really, it's just that there are always two sides and a truth. And although I'm not perfect, and I certainly have admitted a lot of my faults, especially here on the podcast, there's always two different perspectives. And explaining yourself away to somebody, it doesn't really matter. It just doesn't. Until somebody's willing to sit down with you and hear your side of the story, there's really just no point. And yeah, people will talk, and that's just the nature of it. But at the end of the day, can you lay your head down at night knowing that you showed up, you were your best self, you were kind and respectful to people. And if you've made a mistake, that you've owned it and you've apologized and you tried to rectify that. Like those are the most important things. And I have learned that over time, that if I can go to bed at night knowing that I was my best self, and even when I wasn't, I was willing to own it, then that is all I can do. I cannot change anybody else's mind or perspective. So, yeah, that message really kind of threw me for a little bit of a loop. She was so nice and she was so honest and raw about, she just had a different perspective. She heard a totally different story. God only knows what that is, right? And I definitely don't even want to know. But yeah, it threw me back in time to that point of my life. And many people don't really share what it's like to have somebody who's incarcerated. So I hope that I never have to experience that again. But I do know that in that time, it was awful. When you send your letters into them, into prison, correction officers, they open up all the mail. When you go and visit, you're sitting in just like a very sterile environment. It's just cold and just the cement. Like I can vividly remember each of the prisons that we visited her in, and it just felt very cold. And I remember having the thought of like, how does anyone actually recover or get better in prison? It just seems like you put together a whole bunch of people who've committed crimes, and then they just learn how to commit more crimes honestly behind bars, just trying to get by with being able to have enough money to survive off a commissary. People like my mother-in-law at the time, when you go to prison for embezzlement, you don't get to have money on your account, right? You don't get to keep money because you owe somebody else a lot of money. So they take whatever you put on their account. And one of the things we always struggled with was she needed all these things, but at the same time, you'd have to give it to somebody else, put it on their books, and then they would buy her the things. And I remember being torn about that and very upset with my ex because I'm like, I'm not doing this. I'm not participating in this. Like, no mom should ever ask their kid to do something that is not legal. That's not right. And we shouldn't be doing this. And I just, again, I feel like I'm kind of rambling right now. And if you've stuck along this conversation, you probably are seeing that like, oh my gosh, she's struggling here. And I am. It's because it takes me back to a time in my life that was really, really dark. And I felt very much out of control. And I cannot say it enough. Setting boundaries with who you're with, it matters. Family, you would think, should always come first and that they should be your priority. But I'm here to tell you that I don't believe that. I don't. Your family can be anybody, blood or not. Who you choose to surround yourself with and have a part of your life and a front seat to your table, it matters. I had so much anxiety during that stage of my life because I was so young and I had already had a lot of my own childhood traumas that I was still unpacking and trying to figure out. And then at the same time, I was young, getting married and having a mother-in-law who was in jail and didn't really get along with his siblings too well, and there was other dynamics there. So it was just a hard time. And I know that somebody watching this, I know someone is really going through it right now and it feels impossible. You feel like you're never going to get out of the situation. You will get out of it. I promise you. Whether if this is somebody who's just in prison or it's someone who just continuously talks so much crap about you behind your back, and you feel like you have to constantly have to defend that, or you're struggling financially, whatever it is for you, you will get out of this. I promise it's going to get better. But it is going to require you to set boundaries in a way that makes you uncomfortable and that you might have never had to do before. And it's okay. And you might have to do it with some of the closest people in your life. And you don't have to explain yourself. And there will be things of your past that might come up. I think that's the other part of this that I want to share. I am a firm believer that people can change. And although I don't believe my former mother-in-law has changed, it's not for me to decide. It's not for me to put her into a box that limits her of her ability to grow one day. But it is a choice, and you can't make somebody want to do better. You can't make somebody want to grow and to be different and to change. They have to want it for themselves. And so while I have no relationship with her and my kids don't see her, I'm still going to be hopeful that something might change one day. But in the meantime, I'm going to protect me, my family, and our home. And you will get more comfortable with that the more you practice. I unfortunately have had a lot of practice in having to set boundaries with people in my life. But man, the peace that you get from saying no to people and not allowing them to ruin your life anymore is everything. And one thing that I've kind of been a little bit fascinated with on a side note, but around prison topic, Chrisley's, the Chrisleys Know Best, the reality TV show, Julie and Todd Chrisley, they were incarcerated for a little over 2 years and then they were pardoned by the Trump administration. And I listened to their podcast, and since they've been out, their podcast has been a lot about their time being incarcerated. And I do believe that some people are incarcerated when they shouldn't be, like they didn't commit the crime. I do believe that's very possible and that does exist. And when you hear their perspective about how prison was, you can empathize and feel for the people behind bars, because I do believe everyone should have another chance at life. I do. I mean, if I was defined by all the mistakes of my past, it would just be awful, because why would I even want to try to be better if I knew that no one would ever bet a chance on me? And so I'm always hopeful. But do I question our prison system and how much rehabilitation actually happens? I do, because I've been there and I've seen firsthand what they have to do to survive behind bars. And because our prison system lacks, I personally think, a lot of tools and resources to help these men and women, that they're going to just keep in their cycle. And that's why the recidivism rate is so high, because once you get out, no one's going to take a chance on you because you have the record. They also haven't had a chance to fully rehabilitate, and they end up right back in. And so if you're experiencing that, I'm so sorry and I feel for you. It's exhausting. But I can also tell you this. The one thing that I wish I would have done differently back then was not go visit, not accept the phone calls. I do wish that, because I feel as though it was really hard at the beginning when she went away. It was so much harder. Every single time we would go and visit, it was like another layer of trauma added. It was just like another reminder. Like the wound could never heal because you were constantly reminded of it. And then when you would see her behaviors behind bars, it made me even more upset. And so setting boundaries for yourself is so key. And I know I keep saying that, but my friend, if it's the one thing you do this year for yourself, it's starting to let go of the people who no longer contribute to your life in a healthy, peaceful way. And you deserve that. We all do. All right. So thanks for this episode was a little bit different and kind of hard, because I have so much that I want to share about a lot of things in my life. And I haven't quite figured out how to do that in a way that is still respectful to other people. Yeah, I could unleash and unload a lot of things on a podcast and get the clicks. But I think it's important to note, though, that it's not about getting the clickbait. It's not about those things. It's about me healing and growing as a person. And I need to be able to do that in a way that also doesn't tear somebody else down. Because again, I wouldn't want that for myself. I wouldn't want somebody continuously bringing up my past on all the things that I've done wrong. There's been many. So thanks for hanging in there with me today. I would love to hear in the comments if you've had any experience with someone who's been incarcerated, or if you have any questions about that. I know I didn't go into a lot, but hey, I think there might be a book in my future, and then you never know what might come out. But right now, with my kiddos, they're a little bit younger. And for anyone watching who feels the need to tell my kids things about my past or grandparents' past or whatever, they know. They know it all. My kids know everything that I share on this podcast. Why is that? Because growing up myself, people felt the need to tell me all the things that my parents did in their past and how terrible certain things were. And then as I got older, people still felt the need to tell me things that other people that I was close with in my life and all the terrible things they did. And I never ever heard from my parents the things that they felt like they might have made mistakes with, or other people. It was always like other influences telling me these things. And I just thought, no one is going to be able to hurt my children that way. I'm going to take that all away from them right now. Anything I share on this podcast, my husband and my kids know about it. And I really, really hope that, those people don't choose to feel the need to have to interject their opinion or their stories about things that I might have done or their dad might have done or grandparents. It just doesn't serve them. So that's another lesson for this episode. If you're raising children right now and you definitely have stories of your past that are pretty shady, talk with them about it. Now, if they're 5 years old, okay, we're not having those conversations, okay? But my kids are teenagers now, and my youngest is 10, but going on 20. And he doesn't know in depth certain things about some of the things that maybe my oldest knows, but he knows enough to understand, okay, mom has done drugs, mom had sex at a very young age, mom was bankrupt and didn't have money to pay for bills. He does understand surface level things. And I think it's important because then they don't look at me like I'm somebody who's so perfect and that I can't get it wrong either, that I'm human. And my hope is that they will want to share with me things whenever they do make a mistake or they fall short or they experiment with something. Like, I want to be the first to know, and I want them to know you're not going to be judged by this, but we are going to help you move forward. So, okay, my friend, thanks for being here, and we'll just see how this episode goes. If you stuck around till the end, please like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. It really helps get the podcast into the hands of the people who need it the most and who are looking to become a part of a community of people who are wanting to grow. And by you like, sharing, and subscribing to the podcast, it helps make that happen. All right, my friend, thank you so much for being here today. And oh, yeah, you're probably also wondering, where's the robe? I'm still trying to get this podcast studio back in order since Mike redid it. And I just felt like putting on comfy clothes today. This chair is a little bit harder to sit with a robe, and the blanket, it's just not as comfy as my other one. So, all right, my friend, until we meet again, keep your light burning from ash to dusk.